Today, we're talking to Dr. Shannon Irvine all about the invisible thing that almost all seven-figure entrepreneurs have already tapped into. So if you feel like you're stuck in your business and you're not sure why, well, keep listening. Hi, I'm Brandon Lucero, and you're about to experience the new way to thrive in business, entrepreneurship, and life by leaning into who you are, what you love, and standing up for what you want to create. Get ready, because this is where we go against the grain, say no to outdated society norms, and we say yes to change in order to create a happier, more fulfilled world. Welcome to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm really excited you're here because today is going to be an amazing conversation. One of the reasons why is because you guys know that I talk everything messaging. And when we talk messaging, we go deep down the layers. We go through beliefs, how humans form reality. Well, today we have one of my good friends, Dr. Shannon Irvine, on the podcast today to talk about those things. But when it comes to performance-based stuff and as an entrepreneur, how do we start to shift your mind? So Shannon, I'm really excited. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, I'm super pumped to be here. This is going to be fun.
It's going to be amazing. So do you want to start off by just telling everyone a little bit about what it is, so we have kind of the context of where I want to kind of go with this conversation?
Yeah, sure. So as entrepreneurs, we all tend to have big dreams, big vision, things that we want to do in the world, right? We're big impact, big legacy that we want to create. And we also seem to be chained down by beliefs that we didn't choose, that weren't part of something that we designed or gave permission to. But yet we know from brain-based science of performance that those stories, those limiting beliefs, those things that we say to ourselves when nobody's listening are controlling 80 to 90% of your daily actions and decisions. And once you know that, like once you really tap into that and really start to peel back the layers of the brain science of success, how your brain is wired to keep you safe and familiar versus succeed, and how you hack into those systems to actually start to work for you instead of against you, it truly does become your high performance secret that you've been looking for all your life. And it's been as close as that beautiful brain on your shoulders.
Well, yeah. And I think this really goes, I don't know if like misunderstood is the right word, but it kind of goes ignored by a lot of brand new entrepreneurs, because they do a lot of things that you actually call them gas pedal things. Like you say a lot of people will go and they'll try to figure out what's the next strategy, or they'll try to hustle harder, or they'll try to like have the perfect vision board, or just spend all their time manifesting, which, by the way, all those things can help you. But there's something else kind of going on that stops a lot of entrepreneurs at the exact same time. And that's kind of what you're talking about, right? It's kind of like these beliefs and subconscious things going on in their head.
Yeah, it's this invisible programming that you're not really even aware exists. And it's something that you didn't purposefully choose. This is something that got created when you were maybe a child or a young adult that helped you get what kept you safe, which was love, feeling enough, and feeling worthy, feeling taken care of, right? Usually by our family of origin, or even as a young adult, to feel like you're safe and you're protected and you're loved in the world. And so you create, as a child or young adult, a story that allows you to get those things. And I know, like, one of mine, I always like to say, like, what's real? Like, one of mine I heard a lot when I was growing up was, yeah, Shannon, you got to work really hard if you want to be successful. I mean, like, put in the hours, make sure you're working harder than anybody else. And at the same time, I would hear stories like, money doesn't grow on trees. Just, make sure you know that. And this weird kind of us versus them conversation of, we're the hardworking people that are good, and those people over there that make over $200,000 a year, those are those people.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't want to be one of those people. So I found myself sabotaging myself. I could get to $199,999, but if I pass 200, I'm like, okay, I'm going to procrastinate a little bit so that I get back to what's safe and familiar.
Yeah. And that's the way it kind of looks, right? Like if you're if you're sabotaging yourself, you can come out in things like procrastination or imposter syndrome, or what are some of the other things that like people can go like, oh my gosh, maybe I'm suffering from this right now?
Yeah, totally. So if you have ever been a perfectionist, so it's not that you're not doing things, you're doing tons of things, maybe working from the to-do list, but you're forever tweaking the sales page just one more time before you never put it out, right?
Mhm.
So it's never perfect enough, it's never polished enough, you've never expert enough, it's never enough for you to actually put it out there. That perfectionism or procrastination, like I was with the money story, right? I would be hustling up until the point of 200K, and then I would want to hit this. My brain would say, oh, wait a minute, that's not safe over there on that side of the street. So I would start to procrastinate. I'd go take the day off. I would watch Netflix. I would do those things. And then, of course, the business responded and started coming back down. Definitely perfectionism, procrastination, any conversation that you're having over overwhelm, like there's
Yeah.
too many things. I don't have enough time. I'm not sure if I can get all this done. I just have so much to do, those conversations. And definitely the imposter syndrome, because the reality is your brain's job, it's to keep you safe, and the idea of you putting yourself out there in front of people to expose yourself to potential judgment is near like a tank of sharks that you're going into, to your brain at least,
Right.
until you train your brain to transform that into being safe and familiar. So those things, I always say, are like your brain's safety release valves. Is your brain's always trying to get you back to the story and the automation and the networks that are built in your brain of what you feel is safe, not what you want.
That's such an interesting thing because it's like, again, I don't think a lot of people realize this is that you grow up and you get indoctrinated into beliefs, which is the same thing that I've always said when it
Yep.
comes to messaging and stuff. You get it, and
Yep.
indoctrination can happen in so many different ways. Like your
Yeah.
parents tell you, your teachers tell you, an experience happens. Someone says one thing to you at one point, and the brain automatically
Yeah.
goes blah blah blah, blah and just forms these beliefs to try to keep you safe. So
Yeah.
what ends up, if I understand correctly, what ends up happening is someone wants to become an entrepreneur. They go out and they
Yeah.
do everything that they're supposed to do. They still don't see
Hmm.
success. It's likely because going off being an entrepreneur or making money or whatever is classified as not safe, but that not safe thing could even just be I'm not going to be accepted anymore. Like if I become rich, my parents have
Yes.
told me those people are bad, therefore I'm not going to be accepted by them, therefore I'm going to self-sabotage myself. Even though I want to go do this thing, the mind will keep them safe, aka self-sabotage. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I had a client the other day. We were talking through this through our neuro coaching model, and she was I mean, she would get so close to having these massive breakthroughs, and then she would play small.
Yeah.
And that's a big one. Like we want this thing. We call that cognitive dissonance, right? We want this thing, but this automated story is saying that's not safe. And so there's tension and there's resistance. And so she was doing all the right launches. She was following the steps. She was beautifully like executing in the actions. And then she got to a point where she had to really play big, and
Mhm.
she just shrunk. She just pulled back. And as we were like peeling back those onion layers of what she was thinking, and when she first experienced that, I heard her literally gasp. It was like a oh my gosh, if I'm successful, that means that I am proving my dad wrong.
Whoa.
Whoa. Like, what little girl, if you had a good relationship with your father, wants to prove your dad wrong? So,
Yeah.
doesn't it make sense that she get close and then play small?
Well, what makes this so scary is that this is all happening without it's not even in our awareness. It's
No.
like you're going
Mm-mm.
after what you want to go after. Again, doing all
Right.
those gas pedal things that you're talking about, but then we have this like I guess old wiring or old programming going on in our head that's like sabotaging it. And I love the metaphor you use. It's kind of like
Yeah.
driving a car and you're doing all
Hmm.
the gas pedals. So you're taking the strategies, doing all the stuff, buying the courses and doing whatever and doing everything. But
Yeah.
you have your foot on the brake at the exact same time. And everyone's out
Yeah.
there searching for like, I need to fix, I need this benefit, I need this benefit, I need this new thing, new thing, new thing, where it's like, maybe you just shed some of this old. And when you shed
Yeah.
the old, it's like taking your foot off the brake and now you can go. Right.
Yeah. Here's the thing, entrepreneurs don't have to be encouraged to put their foot on the gas.
Mm,
That's what I know about entrepreneurs. I'm one of them. You're one of them. All the people we hang out with, we want to make change in the world. We have big dreams and big visions. So we're looking and searching for the strategies and all the things to create this vision to make it come to life. But we have these invisible automations that you didn't choose. They're not your fault. And they're running without your permission. That's the
Right.
thing. That's not, you didn't give it permission to be there, but it's there. And it literally is like putting your foot on the brake. And that feeling of spinning in circles, that feeling of never being able to get right where you're close, but you never get there, that the only reason is because the foot's on the brake. And once you go through a truly step by step process to taking that foot off the brake, to neutralizing and erasing those stories that were not chosen by you and choosing the stories that actually align with what you want, literally you take off. And,
Yeah.
it's not, you think about it, like we really are indoctrinated in the opposite direction through education. We're told to raise our hand and get permission. So we're being indoctrinated that the answer is outside of ourselves
Mm.
from youth. Raise my hand. Am I right, teacher? Yes, I am. Therefore, I've gotten validation. We're looking in our educational system. We're graded. So we're looking for someone else to tell us that we have followed the right steps and path. And so we're always looking for this external validation saying that what we're doing is right and what we're doing are the right steps. And so that makes sense why we would initially go like, I need a new strategy. I need a new system, something else outside of ourselves when things aren't working. But when you learn the brain science of success and you start to peel this back, there's just literally in your brain a freeway running and it's running on autopilot. And there is a Lego like step by step process to remove that freeway for good.
Mm.
And that, once you tap into that and really slow down long enough so that you can speed up, you no longer have to not just try to use willpower or try to reframe your situation or all of those language tricks that we use sometimes to try to help ourselves feel better during things not going right. We actually can train a network into our mind that will allow us to see things like a seven-figure entrepreneur, allow us to look at failure like a seven-figure entrepreneur does, look at success the same way, look at money the same way. And when you have those networks built in your brain, then success truly is inevitable because your brain believes it, and therefore you start to see it because you make the decisions and take the actions that align with it.
Yeah, and the thing for me, like, when you first started telling me about this, it was like mind-blowing stuff because I understand a little bit of it, like, enough to create really effective messaging and stuff, but, like, you
Right.
go a lot deeper on it, and then I remember at one point, there was something like, I remember hearing you talk, and there was something where something had happened to me. I forget who it was. I don't know remember if it was my wife or family member or someone, but they said something to me, and then I just reacted instantly without even thinking about it. And then I
Yeah.
was just kinda like, "Why did I just do that?" And then I was
Yeah.
like, "Holy crap, this is what
Yeah.
Shannon is talking about." It's like the
Yeah.
mind is wired, or you have those networks or those freeways that just like go, they respond, they do. You do
Yeah.
without you're not even aware of it. Like someone says
Mm.
something insulting to you, you don't sit there and go, "Okay, how do I want to respond to this? What would be
Mm.
appropriate?" But you just blah, 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 and you just do it, and
Yeah.
it's scary. And so when this is happening for you as an entrepreneur, and by the way, what you said is like think like a seven-figure entrepreneur. I have to tell you guys, and every single one listening, every single seven-figure entrepreneur that I know all thinks the same exact way. And
Yeah.
more specifically, what they perceive as a problem is a
Hmm.
lot different than what a brand new entrepreneur does. So
Absolutely.
I have a couple questions. I think the first one is as a parent, like, because it's
Mhm.
kind of scary. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
oh man, I'm going to be like molding my child.
I'm
Are
gonna mess them up.
I'm gonna mess them up. I've kind of gotten to the realization I'm gonna mess them up in some way. Like
Right.
there's no avoiding it. But do you
No.
have any tips for the
Mm-mm.
parents out there raising kids of like
Yeah.
things not to say to them, or any tips to like be aware of when they're bringing their kids up?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. Yeah, the best, and here's the two things I would say. First of all, and this is what I do, I would make sure that every program that is on autopilot is of my choosing.
Mm,
Right. So that's where jiving into this work and going deeper and making sure that, and how you know that is any place that you're triggered, like any place that you're triggered, that you naturally react without permission, like Brandon was talking about.
yeah.
That's when you want to become uber aware of that. Like get curious about it. Don't judge yourself, just get real curious because you didn't choose that. If you're triggered, you're operating off of an old network. And so you didn't choose it. So get curious about why it's there and do the work around removing it, erasing it, and building the one you truly want into your brain. And the biggest thing you can do is teach your kids now at 2 and 3 and 4 that they have the power to do this. Because imagine if you knew at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, wherever age that is, that you didn't have to just react, that you could actually choose your thoughts. You could actually choose the thoughts that create the life that you want. We call that in our neurocoaching model, deciding in advance, DIA. Like you can actually beyond the removal system and the building system in the brain, which truly is like Legos. Like if you can build with Legos, you can do this work. It's so simple
Yeah.
that most people don't slow down long enough to do it. But deciding in advance allows you, and especially as a parent, to decide how does the version of myself that I really want to be react,
Yeah.
respond, and choosing that. So when you do get triggered, you have an alternative to move to other than just trying harder. Because the reality is, like willpower, trying harder when you're triggered. I don't know how much brain science we want to go into, but your fight or flight system is on board. You have very little opportunity at that point to be thinking logically enough to draw a conclusion at that moment.
Gotcha.
So just empowering your kids that they have this opportunity and really ensuring that what you're triggering off of is aligned with who you really want to be as a parent for sure.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
it's just kind of like paying attention and being very self-aware, and then obviously going
Hmm.
through a process to rewire things. So,
Yeah.
can we talk about that process? Like, that
Sure.
I think the biggest question for me is, as an entrepreneur, we're going through and we're trying to do things, and like we join a course or a program, and we see all
Yeah.
these people get results that we aren't doing, but yeah, we're doing the
Yeah.
same steps. Like, how do we even start to identify or realize what it is that we're doing or the old programming? Like, what are the steps that need to happen to like identify, fix, and then automate something
Hmm.
else?
Yeah. I love this. So, one of the things that separates the top 3% from those who aren't is the willingness to be in we call resistance or intention or in the place where you're uncomfortable, right? We're always looking for the map, the full, Disneyland map of where everything is so that we know all the right steps. But in reality, as you start growing your business, you won't have that and you'll be leaning into things that make you feel uncomfortable. So the first real piece of it is knowing that when you feel resistance, what that is from a brain-based perspective is when what you want doesn't align with what's programmed. So
Mm,
anytime you're feeling that lack of confidence or that feeling like, yeah, maybe this isn't the right thing. Now, there's a difference between this and intuition. So that's a whole different conversation. Intuition is just a knowing, right? You just like, this isn't right. I know it. I don't feel weird about it. Like, I just know that's intuition. This is a different thing. And we all are familiar with this, right? When we've gone live or we've done something that feels bigger than what we naturally feel good about and we feel weird and we start hearing ourselves beat ourselves up in our mind. Oh my gosh, what are they thinking? They're probably thinking I'm a failure. They're probably thinking, that conversation, just becoming aware of the actual words you're saying to yourself is really the first step. And the place you hear that the most is when you lean into resistance instead of running away from it.
mm,
So, what is that big next step in your business that you've been kind of avoiding because it seems like it's a little scary? That would be the piece I would say move into that and then listen and hear what it is that you're actually saying to yourself. Here's the thing. I know the term imposter syndrome kind of like encapsulates a lot of thoughts. But in reality, what I was saying to myself wasn't, I have imposter syndrome. It was, who the heck do I think I don't know how to keep it clean here,
yeah,
keep it PC, but who the heck do I think I am to be doing this?
yeah,
Right. So, what is it that you're saying to yourself in those moments when you're stepping into that bigger version of yourself? And the first step of it is literally recording it, writing it down, because this is a story that kept you safe when you were 10
mm,
and you made an agreement that I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep playing small. I'm going to keep whatever it is for you. And sometimes by just the virtue of writing down the exact words that you've said to yourself that nobody else is hearing, and you see them on a physical piece of paper, I've had people come into like the massive revelation of like, oh my gosh, like, no, that's not true. And literally what's happening is you're seeing your subconscious thought in the conscious prefrontal cortex of your mind, in your cognitive ability to read it and look at it and say, do I believe that? Is that true? Does that align with what I say I want, or does that align with what I don't want? And at that point you have a choice, right?
Mm, right.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you basically in those moments where it's almost like where you're hitting the wall, you keep hitting the wall inside
Yes.
of your business. Pay attention to the language that you're saying because you're subconsciously already saying like the old wiring or the old programming is coming up and you're just responding.
Yeah.
Like kind of like I talked about earlier, you're just respond. But
Just responding.
most of the time we're just not aware of it. So you're saying write down those words and really what you're doing is you're moving the subconscious programming into your
To the
awareness.
conscious. Yep.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
amazing.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's like the little secret of your brain. I don't want you to like think like, my brain's conspiring against me. No, no, no. It is your biggest and best competitive advantage. Trust me. Like the way you're naturally wired, once you get this, things are going to be so much easier for you, because the reality is your brain is set up in a way that you're thinking 60,000 thoughts per hour. Thoughts are energy. We can go to the woo place. Woo and this is, I always talk about the science behind why the woo is the woo,
Yep.
right? Because thoughts are energy, literally energy. It's glucose. So when we see it on a brain scan, thoughts are like constantly firing. If your brain had to keep up with that 60,000, you wouldn't be able to move out of your bed. Like
Yeah.
it wouldn't happen. So this beautiful, efficient system says, okay, Brandon, I got your back. Anything that you repeat frequently enough combined with emotion, this, I'm giving a voice to your subconscious right now. But its job is to say, wow, he's repeated that, and he has some emotion connected to that. So now I'm going to assume that's a belief, and I will now take that thought, I will automate that thought for him so he no longer has to spend the energy to think it.
Mm,
And so now your brain is doing what it's wired to do. It's not moral. It doesn't have a vision or a goal sheet. It has just listened to you and said, "Oh, he's repeated that at least 40, 50, 60 times. That must mean what he believes. So I'm going to now make that automate, just totally automatic for him. He doesn't even have to think it now. It will fire 90% of the time for him." So that's the system, how it's set up. It's beautiful once you tap into it, but you didn't know that was going on when you were young. And so that was happening, and wiring was happening without your permission. But once you see it on paper, it's crazy how just reading it will allow your cognitive, logical mind to look at it and call BS. Like, no.
wow.
And that's really, once you've recognized it and then you've actually recorded it down, then it's just that process of refuting. Some of it logical, and certainly some of it has to happen from an emotional standpoint to really make sure we really get after that thought and remove it.
I mean, it makes so much sense. And did I hear you correct in saying we have 60,000 thoughts an hour? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
An hour?
Yeah.
So basically this the body's going, that's way too much. We're just going to automate the
Mm-mm.
most common ones because we know that's what's always going to happen.
Yeah. It's belief.
Jeez. Okay. So what?
And out of belief comes your identity.
Yes.
So, what we believe, we start saying, when you believe, think about it. When you believe something, like let's think about, I'm trying to think about what was one in my business recently. Just like the idea that, like, if I believe that I'm going to have $1 million launch, that's a totally different identity that I take on versus someone that says, I hope my launch doesn't fail. I mean, think about that. Like, how am I going to show up when I'm telling myself over and over again, I hope my launch doesn't fail. I hope my launch doesn't fail. I hope I do a little better than I did last time, versus I am going to have a 7-figure launch and it's going to be amazing and I'm going to serve, right? So if I'm repeating either one of those stories frequently enough and it automates, it is going to inform my decision making, because I'm not going to choose the thought will fire. And then from that thought, I'm going to say, oh, maybe I shouldn't show up, or maybe I should show up big, right?
Right.
It's two different decisions. And from that creates the action that creates the results.
Yeah, and I would say even the person who is saying like, "I hope my launch doesn't fail," kind of
Yeah.
already has programming
Yeah.
showing that it's going to fail.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're already
Yeah.
destined for doom, and that's that point. So how do
Yeah.
we? So now that we like write it down, it
Hmm.
comes into our awareness. Is
Yeah.
it as simple as just repeating things over and over and over again at that point? Like, what do we do once we're like,
Yeah.
okay, great, I'm saying this is the thing that's happening. This is what I'm saying. How like
Yeah.
what's the next step of rewiring something?
Yeah, we call this the mind matrix, and we do call it the rewire step. And we hit it from a couple different areas. So the first thing to know is as soon as you see that thing written on the piece of paper, you need to identify that as a lie. It's not the truth, right? Unless it aligns with your vision, it is no longer the truth. So you need to call it a lie so that your brain starts seeing it as the enemy instead of the thing they wants to protect. And then we want to hit it from a logical perspective. Our prefrontal cortex, our logic brain is looking at it now and it's logically coming up with reasons why this lie is not true, right? So you're going to want to write down, and I'll use an example that I use frequently just so it lands a little better. When I was starting my podcast, I had this momentary thought, and that's how they are, right? They just
Mhm.
kind of, they're like, they flow in and out, and you think, forget it. We try to outperform it. We try to hustle, willpower
Right.
it,
Yeah.
it doesn't work. You can't outperform your subconscious, so it just keeps informing your decisions. So I just had this thought of like, gosh, I wonder if I have enough value to bring to this podcast. It was just a
Mm,
moment, but I heard it and I know well enough what that being planted in my brain would do. So I was like, oh, no, 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 not on my watch. No, thank you. So I wrote down, I don't have enough value to bring to the podcast because that's what I was saying to myself. Um, but that's what the top 3% do. But 97% of people will just kind of dismiss that, right? So
yeah.
that's what I mean about slowing down, like hearing it in the resistance. But I wrote it down. I don't have enough value to bring to the podcast. And my logical brain looked at that. I'm pretending like the paper's here in front of me. And I'm like, well, that's BS. Like I helped entrepreneurs get to 6, 7, and 8 figures in their business by training their brain. I've done this. I've done this. I've, interviewed these people. Right. So I came up with the logical reasons why that was a lie. And I wrote them down.
Yeah.
And this is what you want to do. Look, I know you're going to resist me on this. You're going to want to try to do this work in your head. That's how you make sure that it stays in your subconscious. We need to pull it into the conscious prefrontal cortex. And when we use our motor skills, that actually uses what we call the triad in the brain. In other words, we're using motor skills, we're using memory, and we're using writing along with the prefrontal cortex. That's basically like the trifecta of pulling it out of your subconscious, right? So we're using these brain-based tools to help us neurohack. So we're writing it down. I've done this, I've done this, and you would do that for yourself, all the logical things. But for most people, especially if this has been something that's been like since childhood, they might be writing down logical things, but
Mhm.
at the same time, there's like this internal kind of like, yeah, but I still believe it,
Mhm.
you know? And I mean, that's really, really common. So the flip piece or the emotional or what I call the mirror, to go after that emotion. And I do want to like make sure you understand why we do this because thoughts combined with emotion become beliefs. That's what gets hardwired. We know from neuroscience that the thought fires milliseconds before the emotional center of the brain fires.
Mm.
So we know that thought creates emotion. That is like a hard scientific fact now. But what we do know is those things combine to become a belief when it automates. So if we just go after the logical, we're going to leave a whole piece of the puzzle out that's going to bite you in the booty
Can
down the road. So
can you give me an example of that? Like a thought and
yeah.
emotion forming to give a belief? Like what would be an example of that happening?
Yeah. So you might have a thought like, oh my gosh, I'm on a webinar and nobody's showing up. Right.
Mm.
And that thought doesn't just stay as a thought. The next thing you feel are the butterflies in your stomach. You start to hear the thoughts of like, who did I think I was to do this? Then you start to feel like anxious. Your fight or flight system kicks in and you start telling yourself things like, I'm not going to do this again. I'm going to do a different thing. So your emotions are kicked up and are getting you anxious. They're getting you emotional. They're making you feel like a failure. Those are what's combining with the thought of nobody showing up.
Mhm.
Because if it was just the thought nobody's showing up, unless you combine it with emotions, it doesn't mean anything to you, right? But once you combine it with emotion, is about what it means about your success or what it means about your failure or who you are or your worth, then you feel something, whether it's anger or sadness or anxiety or pain. And that's natural to help us either repeat something that worked out well or not repeat the thing that causes us pain, right? So that triggers. And if you do another webinar later that day or the next day and you have a similar result, now we're repeating that same pattern. And that's where they combine, almost like a packet when they get stored in the memory as both the thought and the emotion, and they store as like one packet.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah.
That
And
was
the emotional piece is, it's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, well, it is, and I didn't realize. I mean, obviously, we've been friends, we talked a lot, but I never realized how this related into my own life. Because I mean, it's that's what everyone's doing, right? Everyone's listening, they're like, okay, they're like
Yeah.
self-analyzing and doing all that stuff now. So
Yep.
as you're talking, doing the same thing, and ever since I understood, like years ago, when I finally understood what, an event happens, you attach a meaning and a story and all that stuff.
Yeah.
I've now been able to go through events and not attach a meaning or a story, which means I wasn't attaching any emotion to it. Is what I realized is actually going on.
Yeah.
Things would happen, and then normally I would react and whatever, but now I was just like, whatever. I'm not going to put a meaning on it. Therefore, which the I guess what ended up happening was no emotion got attached. And then I just left my day and I was unaffected by it. But
Yeah.
I can totally see now that when emotion is attached to a thought, it then becomes a belief. So is there a way to like not attach an emotion? I mean,
Mhm.
I've done it in certain scenarios, but
Mhm.
like, do you have a process for that? Or is it just something we need to be aware of?
Well, yes, and so what I heard you just say,
Mhm.
which was really powerful, if you think about it just through from a different vantage point, what you decided in advance to do
Yeah.
is to not have the thought that it has a meaning. So you chose to not have a thought,
Mm.
right? So you chose to not have a thought. So when you made that decision, the emotions aligned with that thought
Oh,
that you had.
interesting.
So if you had not made that decision, then the emotions would naturally trigger. But because you decided in advance, which that's a key component of the neurocoaching, and you already made the decision that it meant nothing, emotions.
Yeah.
Therefore, when it happened, you're like, no, 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 wait. I've decided that this does not happen. So you actually went through that experience. Just the emotions weren't. You felt they weren't attached. They actually were attached. They were attached to a nothingness. So there was no trigger or
Whoa,
emotion.
that's like
Yeah.
Inception. That's
I
crazy.
know, right? We're going deep. We're going deep. We're going deep. But when we're going through the removal process, the key is most of these self-sabotaging things, like if
Yeah,
we're unaware and we know we're getting stopped, then there is emotion attached to it. And it's not chosen emotion, it's triggered emotion.
right.
So when we've written down the thing that we're saying to ourselves and we've actually written the logical pieces, I have my people go through something that is a little uncomfortable, but it gets to a piece of our brain that have you probably heard of the negativity bias, right? We hear 9 times more negative about our
Oh,
own
right.
self than
Yep.
we do other people,
Yep.
right? So that's why we'll like tell people a million times more about themselves and how they can continue to go as an entrepreneur. And then we're scared to do the same thing,
Exactly.
right?
Yep.
Yep. Right. So what we do on the mirror, we call it a mirror because we go after this particular part of our brain system, which this system was there so that we didn't get eaten by a tiger. That's why we see 9 times more negative in our environment because we were trying to stay safe and familiar, not eaten by the tiger, and making sure that we stay alive, that we find food, those kind of things. Well, obviously, we're not in that environment anymore. However, being an entrepreneur is very close to that same DNA of survival and those type of things. So when we look at this thought sitting on a piece of paper, like, I don't have enough value to bring to the podcast, we need to mirror that outside of ourselves in order to really see the truth,
Yeah.
right? So the truth can set you free. So when I was going through this, you pick somebody that's like, we're both parents. We love our kids equally, right?
Yep.
But you pick one that you would jump in front of a bus for, or your spouse, or your best friend, or whomever
Yep.
that you really, really would be that ride or die. And you imagine out loud, not to their face, but out loud saying that lie to them. So it looks kind
Mm,
of like something like this in that podcast scenario. I imagine my son Max, who's a lovely eye rolling teenager now. I imagine saying to him, Max, you don't have enough value to bring to the world.
wow.
So obviously, he does not starting a podcast. He is doing his own YouTube channel now, but my little budding entrepreneur. But I said it out loud, not with him in the room, but picturing him. And of course, that depends on yourself. If you're going to close your eyes, open your eyes, however you're going to do that, but out loud. We want the auditory nerve to be a part of this. Again, we're using the whole brain system. But what that does is it kicks you into overriding that negativity bias. And you start, especially if you're like me, where I'm like, I'll cut you if you hurt my children.
Yep. Yep.
I mean, the part of me comes out and I'm like, he could do anything. And you start writing, right
Yeah.
down all the truth about them. But the reality is, everything I wrote down on that piece of paper, everything you'll write down on that piece of paper in the mirror is truth about you too.
Wow.
But it's too hard for us to see because we're so hard on
I
ourselves, right?
love that. That's so
Yeah.
powerful too, bringing children. It's like
Mm.
people that don't have kids, I'm like, yeah, I mean, I really believe if you don't want kids, do not have kids.
Oh boy. Yeah.
And
Not for the faint at heart, man.
yeah, that's for sure. But I will tell you, they are one of the best, tools is not the right word, but for lack of a better word, like
Yeah.
tools for success, because I
Yeah.
always think like when I'm in those spots, what example am I setting for my kid, my son or my daughter if I
Yeah.
don't do this or if I don't do that or if I don't go after
So
what I want?
powerful.
But
Yeah.
to hear you take that and imagine saying that to your kids, holy moly, that's like next level. Like that'll
Mm.
snap you quick. Like that'll,
Oh, it snaps you quick.
yeah.
It does. But here's the thing. Remember, the way this story got programmed in the beginning
Mhm.
wasn't that you heard it once. It's not a one and done. It's that you heard it over and over and over, especially if it happened when you were a kid, like I was describing at the top.
Yeah.
Like when you're a kid, there's zero filter. You're
Yeah.
just like, oh, that's the way it is. Okay. Right. So I just assumed you had to work hard for your money because that's what I heard. There's no reason to argue against that.
Right.
As a child, you just assume it. So there's some unwiring to do. And so it's not a one and done. So writing it all down is great, but that's not going to create a success pathway in your brain.
Yeah.
And that's not going to neutralize and erase the story that was holding you back. But what does is super simple.
What is it?
And that is, you got to just take what you wrote down, put it obviously all in the first person, and you record yourself saying those truths.
Yeah.
And just in the very first part of the day when you're waking up, hit play and listen. Subconscious has been working all night, automating what you went to bed thinking, and it wakes up to that. We listen to it also right before bed. So now it has that to listen to as it's automating.
Mm.
So that creates this automation tape in a sense that is telling your subconscious repetitively, this is what I really believe. This is what I really believe. This is what I really believe. And so what's happening inside, if I could give you a brain scan at that point, you're literally like brick by brick by brick, building that success pathway to the truth. And you're pruning away. Synaptic pruning is the geeky term, but literally one strand at a time, you're separating that automatic pathway to the point where you'll hit a point where it just does not fire anymore. And the
Mm.
only thing that fires is that truth that actually aligns with the vision that you want instead of what was holding you back.
That's amazing. And it almost like you mentioned it a little bit, but it almost seems too simple. But then
I
as soon
know.
as that thought comes in my head, I'm like, wait a minute,
There's the
is that my
automation.
automated programming thinking it needs to be harder?
Mhm.
So you see it
Yeah,
all the time going in
you
there,
do.
and it's scary, but cool at the same time. It's scary that these are going on and they're formed without us realizing it. But when you look back at the foundation of how it got formed in the first place, it really was nothing more than repetition, something we've
Yeah, it's
heard
not
over
your
and over and
fault.
over again. Yeah.
Yeah, you didn't choose it. And I don't know about you. I know the DNA of most entrepreneurs. We tend to like to, I don't know, create what hasn't been created before. We like to maybe control things because we're not super employable. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And I don't know about you, but if something is operating 90% of the decisions I make on a daily basis, I want to decide what that is and make sure I have given it 100% approval. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's actually so empowering because you start to realize, wait a minute, not only this is how I'm wired, I have full control over it. And the answer was already inside of me.
Mm,
Like it really was. The power was inside of me. The control was inside of me. The ability is a process that maybe you didn't go, and learn in the school I did. And Brandon knows I went and got my neuropsychology degree, not because I was super smart, but because I was a hot mess trying to figure it out too. So that's a whole long story. But the reality is once you tap into this, it really does feel like a superpower. It really feels like, okay, what can I create? Because in terms of how things get achieved in the world, the science of high performance, your brain has to believe it 100% before you see it. It has to be automated, and once it's automated, it's like what you automate, you create. it
yeah.
it just has to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, it makes so much sense now that you, like, break it down, and again, like, for
Yeah,
anyone that has any resistance around it, like, I really challenge you to look at yourself objectively and go like, is that your old programming? 'Cause it's chances are it probably is.
yeah.
And this process seems very simple, but how often do you need to go through it? And is it something you can do on your own? Like, let me give you an example. Like if someone realizes they have self-imposter syndrome and then
Hmm.
they have like something else going on and they recognize there's two different things they need to fix, do they go through this process to fix one of them and then repeat it for the other one, or can you be tackling like multiple things at one
Yeah,
time?
yeah. So here's the great news. When you go after one, usually there's a source, like what I've learned is there seems to be like a source story that's at the core. And once you start unraveling, kind of like a sweater, if you start pulling the string, right?
Hmm.
Once you start unraveling that first one, which might feel surface level, all of a sudden it just starts exposing the rest of it. But you can really tackle them all at once. I have only in my 12 years of working and developing and working through this neurocoaching model, the most I've ever seen is two stories.
Mm,
So really what it is first of all, we're all too close to our own stuff,
yeah,
right? And that's the thing. Like we've had this automation going for so long, it feels comfortable to us. It doesn't feel like a
it
threat,
feels
right?
safe.
It feels safe. And so because it feels safe, sometimes we'll get caught up in the story of, oh, I'm not really hearing anything. That's why really having somebody close to you that knows the process, that can kind of help you walk through that process and hold your vision high for you so that you don't play small as a safety release valve, or don't like start moving into those like release valve type actions, putting your foot back on that brake. But it's also key for you to realize that once you learn this methodology, like once you really dive in and you get the big one kind of moved, the big rock, we like
Right.
to say, you move that out of the way, and things start becoming easy, and success starts coming to you more simply, and launches just triple out of the blue. I mean, literally, one of our students the other day was going through, cleared it, launched. I challenged her on one piece on ads. She did it, even though it felt very uncomfortable, because think about it. It's not going to feel comfortable in the beginning. It grows with comfortability as it becomes more familiar.
Right.
And her launch was close to a $300,000
Oh,
launch.
amazing.
I mean, from like struggle barely to the fives, barely, barely, barely. Right. So, and she said it was easy. It was simple.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. But here's the thing, you're going to level up.
And you got to go through it
New
again.
level, new
Yeah.
devil. And it's not that it's a new story and you're like, oh, I'm back to square one. No, no, no. You've got the tools, you've got the method, you've got the support around you. That's when, because the further, Brandon, the
Mhm.
further up you move in your business in terms of impact and income, the smaller and smaller the guide map becomes,
Right.
right?
Yep.
The path, no, in the beginning, it's like there's all the steps, and then it gets smaller and smaller. And before it's like, oh, what is that movie where he has to, is that like I'm picturing it, but I can't think of the name of the movie where he's got to like step out before the path appears.
I don't
What
know.
is that movie?
I'm not sure.
Like Indiana Jones or something. He has to like step out and then the path appears. That's kind of what it's like when you get up, in the multiple sixes and seven figures. And so having this methodology allows you to truly be the creator of your thoughts as you're moving into unknowns, as you're going into new scenarios that you've never been, maybe stages that you've never been on before, maybe being asked to speak, just things that you haven't had exposure to before. You have this process to be able to quickly go after things that could take you out of the game. And that is so powerful.
It is. And I remember when I started using some of these concepts almost 2.5 years ago, that's when we like saw a huge growth inside the Video 4X effect. And I look back
Yeah.
at it, and we actually did a podcast episode on this of like how many actions I took in those 2.5 years. Cause it all sparked from this client that we had, and the client had asked me one question, and then 2 years later asked me this same exact question. I was like, wait, you haven't done anything yet? It's been 2 years. Like, what are you
Wow.
doing? And I look back at all the action we've taken, but I remember now it's just because we've applied these concepts that allows us to start
Yeah.
taking these actions and rewiring the way I was
Yeah.
programmed in, is like,
Yeah.
whoosh, like massive, massive success. And then you're right, like new level, new devil, because right around a million, a little over a million, I hit a plateau again. And I was just like,
Mm-hmm.
what is going on? And then it took another
Mm-hmm.
up leveling. And then it was almost like another release. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Like, here you go. You're now allowed. And I'm not that I'm allowed, but it was like, you're now moving. Like, well, it almost did feel like it was allowed. It felt like
Yeah.
there was a wall there that's like someone had the key to, and I wasn't able to get through. And then like
Yeah.
switch it up, and they're like, here's the key. And you like walk through, and just, whoosh, it was just amazing. So
Yeah.
I know that you have a video series coming out on this. What can you tell me a little bit about the video series? What's in it, and what will they learn if they decide to go check it out?
Yeah. No, we're so excited about this. We're calling it the rise of the unleashed entrepreneur. And we're going to break down these three key components to getting really clear and showing your brain exactly what it is that you want to have so that you can know the map to program. Then we're going to go through and teach you how to neutralize and erase, just like we were talking about today, but we're going to go a lot deeper because once those are erased, you're going to start to get some momentum built. You're going to start to see success. And then we're going to also dive into now, how do we automate this in the brain so that it becomes on autopilot? So success truly does become inevitable. And you really do lean into that next level of your vision and life, the thing that you got into entrepreneurship to begin with.
Yeah,
And we're really going to give you all of the step-by-step processes in order for you to truly unleash yourself as an entrepreneur, no longer be chained back by your foot being on the brake and not having the knowledge or the secrets that you felt like were outside of yourself. You're going to discover where they originate from and really be able to get unleashed into your
I
business. So
love
I'm
that.
super excited
I'm
about it.
excited too. And unleash, that's a perfect word, because that's literally how it feels. It just feels
Yeah.
like you're just this person with ultimate power and control, and you just take off.
Yeah.
Um, okay. So if you guys want to opt in for this series, you guys can go to brandonlucero.com/unleash. So that's brandonlucero.com/unleash. We'll have links around the show notes and stuff like that as well. And when does it get released? What's the date on that?
July 27th, the video series is open to everybody who opts in. And then we're going to have a fun group and we're going to dive deep into some trainings around that in the group as well. So I can't wait to have you there.
Amazing. Shannon, is there any last words you'd like to leave people with?
I just want to encourage you as you're listening to us to go back and even listen again with some curiosity, right, around your thinking and challenge yourself to just be the creator of your thoughts today. Like, choose the thoughts, know that the thinking that you have is either going to align with the vision and the things that you want or the things that you don't. There is no neutral thought. So get curious, get creative, and really become the creator of your thoughts today. And I can't wait to see you in the video series and help you go deeper.
I can't wait to. And guys, I really recommend this. Again, there's a reason why 1,000 people can enter a course or get the same mentor and all get different results. And it's because of what
Mm.
Shannon is talking about. So I highly recommend you guys go check it out. That's brandonlucero.com /unleashed. Shannon, thanks so much.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Of course. Hey guys, thank you so much for checking out another episode of the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, go below, hit the subscribe button, and make sure you click on that bell icon and get notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, if you're looking for the show notes, we have them linked underneath this video, as well as our social media handles and some links to free training and offers that we drop from time to time to help you guys even further. So go check those out if you're interested, and thank you so much for tuning in to the New Generation Entrepreneur Podcast.